This coming Motzei Shabbat is the opening of the season of Slichot for Ashkenazi Minhag. We mentioned already the week before that Sfaradim have already begun Slichot right after Rosh Chodesh Elul for the entire period until Yom Kippur. The big advantage of the Sfaradim is that every single day it's the identical Slichot, the same poetry, piyutim, relatively easy to understand, much melody associated with it. Adon Slichot pochen levavot, and then people sing it. Adon Slichot pochen levavot, kol hamukot tzedakot chatanu lefanecha rachem aleinu. And it goes on, and little kids, they know it. And such poetry, which is really beautiful. Ashkenazim make life very, very difficult because, as usual, because each day the poetry is different and one harder than the next to understand, to decipher. You have to be an expert in medieval Hebrew. You have to know Tanakh cold. You have to know Midrashim very well to see how the poets were working with all this material to bring out a particular message. And therefore, because most people don't have a clue of what they're saying it very fast. And the idea of Slichot is to finish saying Slichot and get the fastest Bal Tfilah up there to do. Our Rabbi Rav Soloveitchik understood that it would be important for us to understand poetry. It took time to explain both the Kinot on Tisha B'Av and the Slichot for the Slichot season, that we should have an understanding. Some poems are easier to understand than the others. Those that are marked in the Slichos booklets, Pizmon, where the Chazan is going to say stanza by stanza, and there's a type of refrain, those are usually the easiest ones to understand, so at least people should focus on that. I remember many, many years ago, I picked up the Rabbi Abraham Rosenfeld Slichot with English translation with some annotation, and obviously it makes it a little easier, but you have to look at the poems before you get to shul, because if you're going to do it while you get to shul, you're going to miss the whole Slichos. That's for sure. So what is this Motzei Shabbos kickoff that Ashkenazim do? The truth of the matter is, Slichot is mentioned by the Rambam. If you look at source number, where did I write it? I'm sure I have it here. It's not number one. Did I not put it on this page? I didn't put it on this page. 1 second. Oh yeah, I have it. Source number 2. Source number 2. The Rambam in Hilchot Shuvah, where at the very, very end, where the Rambam talks about that in the Aseret Mei Teshuvah, we should be upgrading our mitzvah, and we spoke about this already last week. So the Rambam says at the very end, Nahagu kulam lakum balayla basara yamim elu ulitpalel bevatei knesiyot bedevrei tachnunim ubekibushin ad sheyeor hayom. Translated, and the general custom is that we get up at night time, but it's the very end of the nighttime. We call Ashmorat HaBoker for 10 days, successive days of the Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, and we have tefillot in shul that are designed as tachnunim. We'll explain what the difference between tachnunim and tefillah is all about. Ad sheyor olam, until the break of dawn. So if you just take a look at the calendar today, or look at the clock today, we're talking about 5:30 in the morning today. The break of dawn is shortly after maybe 5:30, and I think you can put on talis and tefillin today at about 22 or 5:45, and Netzach Hama, which is the sunrise, about 6:30 this morning. So the Rambam is talking about getting up earlier than usual. Like he was thinking about maybe an hour earlier. If you look at the Sfaradi shuls in the neighborhood, if they post their Slichos time for this month, it's at about 4:45 to 5 o'clock. That's when people come to shul, and then they daven shacharit. So the Rambam has 10 days of Slichot, which include 2 days of Rosh Hashana. It includes Shabbos Shuvah. It's amazing that nobody does that today. Nobody has Slichot on Rosh Hashanah. I mean, Rosh Hashanah davening is long enough, but we do not say Slichot on Rosh Hashanah. So you have the 10 days marked by the Rambam. The Rambam was a Sephardi, and he does not know of the custom of saying Slichot for 40 days, from beginning of Elul until Yom Kippur. He is not in that range. That came into the Sephardi custom through a different angle, and became very popular and became adopted by the Sephardi ritual of having this 40-day period of Slichot. But of all things, the Ashkenazim actually picked up on the 10 days of Slichot, with one catch. From the 13th century onwards, there was a group called the Hasidei Ashkenaz, not to be confused with the Baal Shem Tov's modern Hasidic movement of 300 years ago. The Hasidei Ashkenaz, they were part of the Balei Tosfot era in Germany and France, and some of them had many strict opinions on customs in so many different areas. I mean, I'll just throw out one or two that some of us think are ironclad, maybe from Sinai, but they're from the Hasidei Ashkenaz. One is that if a man gets married, so he shouldn't marry a woman who has the same name as his mother. You may have heard of this, right? And if that happens sometimes, either they bust up the shidduch or they add a name to the kala. So, right, her name was Rachel, but now she's Rachel Malka, or something like that. That's either bypass road and get out of it. All it was that Rabbi Yehuda Chassid gave instructions as a will to his own family not to do it. But that then snowballed into a custom amongst many people. Of course, if the Chatan has the same name as the father-in-law, that was never part of the will. And only in the days of Rav Shlomo Gansfried, the author of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch in Hungary about 250 years ago, he flipped it and said, yeah, and if the Chatan's name is like the father-in-law, it also should be. But that was never really accepted, except by a few, and most people are not terribly concerned about that. But there are other ideas of the influence of the Hasidei Ashkenaz. Perhaps most popular is the Rosh Chodesh davening in Musaf, to put a parenthesis around Ulchaparat Pasha and say it only in a leap year, where it says Chadesh Aleinu et HaChodesh Zeh. They were busy counting words in davening and attaching significance. And when they said Chadesh Aleinu et HaChodesh Zeh, L'Tovah, L'Vracha, L'Sason, L'Simcha, L'Shuah, Nechama, bingo, it was 13 brachot. 13 brachot. What do you do with 13 brachot? So if we put a parenthesis around the last one, so then it becomes 12 brachot, and that makes sense because the months are divided into 12. And 7 out of 19 years, the year has 13 months. So we'll add Ulchaparat Pasha for the leap year, where if you go back to the early manuscripts of davenings, way before the Hasidei Ashkenaz, they said Ulchaparat Pasha every month, because it was part of the trio of Limchilat Chet, Lislichat Avon, Ulchaparat Pasha. We say this on Yom Kippur. V'al kulam Eloah slichot slach lanu, michal lanu, kaper lanu. Why are there 3 words to indicate atonement? Because there are 3 different levels of sin. There's chet, avon, and pesha. Each one is a different level of transgressing before God. And that's a shir in itself. But each one carries with it an appropriate antidote. So it's there's mechilat chet, there's mechila, Slichat Avon, the Slicha, and Kaparat Pesha. So each one carries with it an appropriate antidote. So that's the way it was in Rosh Chodesh davening, because Rosh Chodesh is a mini Yom Kippur. It's really the Yom Kippur Katan. And the proof is, how does the Rosh Chodesh Musaf begin? Roshei Chodeshim Lamcha Natata Zman Kapara. It's a season of atonement. And the idea was, if it's a mini Yom Kippur, so maybe we should fast Yom Kippur, except that on Rosh Chodesh, you're not allowed to fast. So the custom was to move the fast of Rosh Chodesh as a mini Yom Kippur to Erev Rosh Chodesh. And that's why Erev Rosh Chodesh in the calendar is listed as Yom Kippur Katan, a mini Yom Kippur. And some people do this very day, still say Slichos by Mincha of Erev Yom Kippur. So this is just an impact of the Hasidei Ashkenaz, and it made it. And then afterwards, people start giving all kinds of explanations why you need more kapara in a leap year. some are funnier than the others. So, but we know what happened. We know exactly what happened. They simply put parentheses around the last one. That was that. So when we talk about the Slichot, the Hasidic Ashkenaz not only said Slichot for 10 days, but fasted for 10 days. Now, of course, they ate at nighttime, but they fasted for Aseret Yemei Tshuva. But the problem is that 4 out of the 10 days you're not allowed to fast. 2 days Rosh Hashanah, Shabbat Shuvah, and Erev Yom Kippur. You're not allowed to fast. So in all these, that's 40% of the Aseret Yemei Tshuva. So what do? They move back to before Yom Kippur, the makeup of 4 days of Slichot with fasting. So that's how the idea of saying Slichot by Ashkenazim became 4 days before Rosh Hashanah. Now, 4 days for Rosh Hashanah this year works out perfectly because Rosh Hashanah comes out on Thursday. So it is Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We talk about the Motzei Shabbos, that's already the Sunday Slichos. So Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You have the 4 days. But then from a completely different source comes the idea that we should begin saying Slichot on Motzei Shabbat. But you have to have at least 4 days. So this year, you get your 4 days in because Rosh Hashanah is on Thursday. But when Rosh Hashanah is on Shabbat, and you would still want to start on Motzei Shabbat, you're going to have 2 extra days of Slichot. You'll have Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And if Rosh Hashanah comes out on Monday, then you're going to have more. You're going to have Motzei Shabbos, which is Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. And that can happen. And you can even have Rosh Hashanah on a Monday. It says, Lo adu Rosh, Aleph Dalet Vav. Rosh Hashanah cannot come out on Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday. The first day, that is, the first day of Rosh Hashanah. Cannot come out on the Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday. Why not? Because, remember we say in L'chadodi, Sof ma'aseh b'machshavat tchila. Yeah, if you think up front, what you need the end game, something you have at the end, if you calculated it earlier, that'll be good. Sof ma'aseh b'machshavat tchila. We don't want Yom Kippur to come out neither on Friday nor on Sunday, because that would be 48 hours of no possibility of cooking. A Yom Tov, you're allowed to cook. So Yom Tov can be next to a Shabbat. But Yom Kippur, which is like Shabbat, you don't want back-to-back Yom Kippur with Shabbat on either side. So if you don't want Yom Kippur to fall out on Friday or Sunday, make sure Rosh Hashanah doesn't come out on Thursday or Friday. Wednesday or Friday. So that's the Wednesday and Friday, the Dalet and the Vav. But what about Aleph? Why can't Rosh Hashanah come out on Sunday? I'm talking about the first day of Rosh Hashanah, Aleph Tishrei, because if that happens, then Hoshana Rabbah comes out on Shabbat. And we don't want that either, because with regard to Sukkot, if it comes out on Shabbat and you don't take the Lulav and Esrog, Beseda, but there's still tomorrow and the day after, because we take the Lulav and Esrog for 7 days. But Hoshana Rabbah is 1 day of taking the Aravot. And the same restriction would kick in if Hoshana Rabbah would come out on Shabbat, we wouldn't take it. And then we'd be missing the mitzvah of taking the Arava on Hoshana Rabbah. And therefore, we programmed the calendar as such that Rosh Hashanah shouldn't come out on Sunday, so that Hoshana Rabbah should never come out on Shabbat. Those are the pragmatic reasons accepted by 99.9% of the greats of the Middle Ages, the Rishonim. Of course, who's going to be the spoiler? The Rambam. Right? He's always the spoiler. And if not for the fact that the Rambam's the spoiler, we wouldn't have hundreds of books that have been written in the last 800 years about the Rambam. The Rambam writes that from Sheshet Yemei Breshit, from the days of creation, as an astronomical truth, the first of Tishrei cannot fall out on Sunday, Wednesday, or Friday. And the one who really argues, vehemently, is his older contemporary, Rabbi Avraham ben David, the Ravid from South France. And he says, look, he went to school. What do I know? I never went to school. So he's a scientist. He's big shot. He's a scientist, astronomer. He can make that comment. But I just know Mishnayot. And according to the Mishnayot, Hoshana Rabbah can come out on Shabbat, because there are discussions about scenarios of Hoshana Rabbah on Shabbat. So if it couldn't happen astronomically, why in the world would any of the Chachamim even talk about it? So he challenges the Rambam on that. And then there was a younger Sephardi contemporary of the Rambam by the name of Rabbi Meir Halevi Abulafia, and he's known by his initials Resh Mem He, Rama. He wrote a book, Yad Rama, on Masechet Sanhedrin, that people won't budge without it when studying Masechet Sanhedrin. And there you have the sugyot of Kiddush HaChodesh and Ibur Hashana in the first chapter. So he mentions this Rambam and he challenges him as well. And he says on this halacha that the Rambam writes that the Aleph Daled Vav, the Lo Adu Rosh, the Rosh Hashanah can't come out on Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday. He says, Al Tikra Mishneh Torah Ela Mishaneh Torah. Don't call it Mishneh Torah, that's the name of the book that the Rambam calls it, but the one who changes Torah, Mishaneh Torah. That is really a sharp, a stinging attack on the Rambam. But all right, the Rambam, as they say, Hu b'Shalo, he said what he said. So now you have the idea that we have at least 4 days of Slichot before Hashana in Ashkenazi ritual, perhaps more, because we always want to start on Motzei Shabbat. But let's try to get a handle on what this Motzei Shabbat is all about. And the title is B'Motzei Menucha Ki Damnucha Tchila, which is the title of the Pizmon, the central song of this coming Motzei Shabbat. Now, many people have made a big to-do about the first Slichot. While many men or women may not attend Slichot the whole week, but Motzei Shabbat, it became big. Now, Motzei Shabbat used to be a midnight thing. The Rambam doesn't talk about a midnight thing. It was the Kabbalists who threw in the idea that the Slichot should start at midnight. Not only on Motzei Shabbat, but every night that the Slichot is being said. And that has to do with the moment of Chatzot, midnight, as being a type of change of the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu relates to each and every one of us during the nighttime from sundown, which is a time that maybe it's not the best time of HaKadosh Baruch Hu paying attention to our tefillot, what's called Eit Ratzon, a time that it's an appropriate time. But from Chatzot onwards, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is tuned in. So you have this concept called Tikkun Chatzot. Tikkun Chatzot is Kabbalists got up at midnight and they cried and they wailed about the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. That was an idea of Tikkun Chatzot. So, and it actually goes back to David HaMelech, where it says that he had an alarm clock. It's the beginning of Masechet Brachot, Daf Daled. It says David HaMelech used to wake up at exactly Chatzot when his harp started playing almost on automatic because a wind that blew in and at midnight changed direction, and he woke up and he began singing to Kadosh Baruch Hu, and that is why he wrote Ura Chvodi, Ura Hanevel V'Chinor, A'ira Shachar. My harp has awakened, but he's talking about himself. My honor, my glory, speaking about himself. Ura Chvodi, wake up, Ura Hanevel V'Chinor. My harp has now awakened us. A'ira Shachar. I am going to awaken the morning, which means I am wide awake as the night comes to an end, and he starts singing. Right? There's a famous song, Ura, 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 Chevodi. That's the pasuk. And the Gemara says, Ura Chevodi, Ula Arneva V'chino, A'ira Shachar. So David HaMelech already gives us this little inkling that midnight is a great time to start singing to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and turning to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. All of the Tehillim is not just song, but it's also bakasha, it's also request. So you have all this idea of Chatzot. So the Shlach HaKadosh, Shnei Luchot HaBrit, one of the Kabbalists, he already introduces that Slichot should be on midnight. What Ashkenazim did traditionally was they kept the Slichos to a pre-Shachris throughout the season, except for Motzei Shabbat. Motzei Shabbat, they said, all right, at least once, the opening number of the Slichos season will begin at Chatzot. And that became very, very known. I remember growing up in New York, Slichos was at Chatzot. Who said Slichos at 10 p.m. or 10:30 p.m.? The conservative shul. The Reform shul didn't bother with Slichos at all. But the conservative shul had Slichot, at a convenient time. And everybody would poke fun at them. They don't understand. Chatzot, there's that. Until, slowly but surely, in the modern Orthodox world, it crept in. And the reason was because people didn't come to shul in summertime at 1:45. In the morning, it was hard. And more people would be able to show up at a more convenient time, 10 to 10:30. Rav Moshe Feinstein Zatzal was already questioned about this, and he gives begrudgingly a green light to the early Slichos. He doesn't like it, but he says, look, the idea that there's no Eit Ratzon at nighttime that doesn't have halachic basis. It's a Kabbalistic idea, fine, but it doesn't have a halachic basis, and therefore you can't prohibit it because the Kabbalists thought you should start from Chatzot. And therefore, he says, yeah, it may not be the most traditional thing in the world to do, but if the local rabbis think that this is going to help bring more attendance for people to say Slichos, so it's worthwhile. It's a worthy endeavor. So you see that Rav Moshe Feinstein is struggling between he doesn't want to get into the slippery slope business, but he thinks that all right, it passes, and I'm sure Rav Moshe didn't realize how popular ultimately it's going to catch on in the various shuls of modern Orthodox settings, which you have here in Eretz Yisrael today. Here in Eretz Yisrael, it caught on at least 20, 30 years after it was in America. That's because we're a little slow until we bring it over, till it came on Aliyah, the idea of early Slichot. But I still remember Slichot in Borough Park, before there was early Slichot. I say again, at the conservative shul, there was conservative shul. There was a conservative shul, Temple Emmanuel, where David Kusevitsky was the chazan. But his older brother, Moshe Kusevitsky, davened in Bethel of Borough Park, and it started at 12:30. Rabbi Shor, Zichron Livrocha, gave a drasha for half an hour, and then Moshe Kusevitsky started at 1 o'clock, and he went till 4 a.m. And the shul was packed, 1,700 people to listen to Moshe Kusevitsky. So the question was it a davening? Or was it a grand cantorial concert? That is the general. The Rav once said, I like chazanas very, very much, but not in shul. He once said this, in a record, remember records? There was a thing called records. I have to tell kids what records are, taklitim, phonograph. Yeah. So I have, and those of you who've been with me to Poland, so Moshe Kusevitsky was a chazan in Warsaw, in the Tolomacki Shul, which was part of the Warsaw Ghetto, was blown up in May 1943 after the Warsaw Ghetto was put down, after 3 weeks of the uprising. And in 1937, Moshe Kusevitsky, live in davening, was recorded. What happened was, several years ago, my wife gave me a disc as a birthday present, Moshe Kusevitsky with one condition, that I can only play it when she's not home. Because, you see, chazanas, you either love it or you don't love it. But there's no in between. Nobody's neutral on this one. You either really like it or you really don't like it. Besada, okay, so I'm a big fan of Shalom Bayit, so I don't play it at home. But the one piece that was really important on this was a piece from Slichos. Ashamnu mikol am, boshnu mikol dor. We say, after we say Hashamna Bagadnu Gazalnu, there's this little piece there. And it said on the jacket of the cover of the disc, it said that after the Shoah, Kusevitsky never sang this piece at a concert, he never recorded it again, and when he davened Slichos, he never said it. He put parentheses around it. Why? Because after the Shoah, he couldn't bring himself to say, Ashamnu Mikol Am, we are more guilty than other nations. He just couldn't do it. He didn't think it was right. So you might think, well, what kind of chutzpah? It's part of the Slichot. Where is he to come and put parentheses around this section? You want to know something? My rating for Moshe Kusevitsky went up after I saw that. Because the Gemara tells us, we know that the Gemara tells him, Masechet Brachot, that we say in Shmoneh Esrei, Hakel, Hagadol, Hagibor, V'Hanorah. Right? That's what we say in the introduction of Shmoneh Esrei. So one of the Tanaim heard a colleague go on and on with more superlatives about a Kadosh Baruch Hu. And he looked at him, this one Chacham said, are you finished? You through? You got it all in? I mean, the point is, you can never get it all in. So why do we say, Hakel, Hagadol, Hagibor, V'Hanorah? Because Moshe Rabbeinu said it. It's in Parshat Ekev. So if Moshe Rabbeinu said it, we have a license to use it. And then the Gemara says that Yirmiyahu took off Gibor and Daniel took off Norah because they saw the Churban, they saw the destruction right in their face, and they could not relate to Kadosh Baruch Hu as the Gibor or as the Norah, the awesome. It just didn't make sense with reality. And then came Anshe Knesset Gdolah when we rebuilt the second Beit HaMikdash, and they restored it. And that's why we say, Hakel Hagadol Hagibor V'Hanorah. But what do you derive from that Gemara? If you think there's something in the Siddur that you cannot possibly be honest with between you and God, don't say it. That's what the Gemara is really teaching us. And that's what happened with Moshe Kosovitsky. He couldn't say it. Ashamnu mikol am. We are more guilty than any other nation after the Shoah. It doesn't make sense. I'll tell you a little anecdote. I'm not going to even get close to describing who I'm talking about because I want to protect the privacy. But there was a situation when I was Rav in Ramot of a person who went through a tragedy in the family of the nature that there was room to be angry with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There was room. And the person did not want to go to Shul on Yom Kippur, wanted to boycott the whole davening, didn't want to see God. And believe me, it was a scenario that you may not justify it, but at least you can understand it. You can understand where that person was coming from. And I asked the person, if you want to sit down before Yom Kippur with the machzor and a pencil, let's go through all the tefillot of Yom Kippur and put parentheses around any phrase that you thought was problematic for you. And this person was willing to do that exercise, and we went through the machzor from Kol Nidri until Nila. And it was filled up with a lot of parentheses. This I can't say, this I can't say. Okay. I said, look, al acharuyuti, on my achrayas, on my responsibility. Come to shul, or if not come to shul, at least at home. Say what you don't have in parentheses. Even though it may not even make sense. You're cutting a sentence in half and so on. Whatever you don't have in parentheses, that's what you'll say. Kadosh Baruch Hu will put it together somehow. I took a page out of Shlomo Carlebach, who was in Russia once and met a Jew who said he doesn't know how to daven. He just learned the Aleph Bet. And Shlomo said, just say the Aleph Bet. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu put the letters together as words and words together as tefillah. And that was a Kabbalistic idea, by the way. Shlomo didn't make it up. It was a Kabbalistic idea. And I took a page out of Shlomo. I said, you know what? Let's see if this works. And that's what that person did. A year later, we sat down with the same exercise. And the person still put parentheses around, but there were a lot less parentheses. And the year later, we did it again, and there was still some parentheses, but much fewer. By the fourth year, the person was ready to go back to shul with a full machzor. I told this to Rav Lichtenstein Zatzal once. I said, this was a creative trick. But it was not a trick, it was therapy. And it was therapy based upon Yirmiyahu and Daniel, who felt that they could somehow abbreviate what could be said about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because they didn't think they could do it. And apparently, there was a little spark of that in Moshe Kosovitsky as well. And he was willing to skip it, because he just couldn't say, Ashamnu b'kolam. Rav Lichtenstein told me that was very creative. I don't know if he thought he was good or not good, but he just told me it was creative. And I told him it worked. And if it works, you can't do this with everybody, but you have to really size up the person and be careful how you do something like that. But yes, it can work. So let's take a look at source number 1. In source number 1, it says, Vayavor Hashem al panav vayikra. The Gemara Masechet Rosh Hashana Yud Zayin Amud Bet tells us on the pasuk that Parshat Ki Tisa, where Moshe Rabbeinu is being taught by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that in time of spiritual trouble, here is the formula. It's called the 13 attributes. Shloshes Remidot. Vayavor Hashem al panav vayikra. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Ilmalei mikra katuv. If this pasuk wouldn't have been written, Efshar le'umro. We'd never have the gall to say what's behind this pasuk. What's behind this pasuk? Melamed shenitatev HaKadosh Baruch Hu kishliach tzibur. It's as if HaKadosh Baruch Hu draped himself with a talit like a chazan, like a shliach tzibur. Parenthetically, this is the reason that a chazan wears a talis at slichos at night, even though nighttime is not a time for tzitzis, because it's based on that a Kadosh Baruch Hu draped himself with a talit, and the chazan on Slichos night is playing the role of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, believe it or not. We have a few times that the chazan plays the role of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And one of the famous ones is during Birkat Kohanim, Duchening. Who gives the bracha of Birkat Kohanim? Not not the Kohanim. V'samu et shmi al b'nei Yisrael va'ani avarachem. God is the source of the bracha. But he said that the bracha should go through the Kohanim. Levarech et amo Yisrael bi'ava. That's why the Chazan feeds the words to the Kohen. Each word, Yevarecha, Yevarecha, Hashem, Hashem. It's not because the Kohen's not going to know what to say. I mean, my gosh, after the Kohen's up there for 50 years, he knows the Birkat Kohanim by heart. So why are we doing it? We're doing it so that the Chazan shouldn't think for a split second that he is giving the bracha. He's only transferring the bracha. And the bracha comes from a Kadosh Baruch Hu. He's being fed it by the Chazan, who's playing the role of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. And here too, the Chazan wears a talit, playing the role of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Veher'alo leMoshe seder tefillah, and he shows Moshe Rabbeinu the order, seder hatfilah, which means that Hashem Hashem kerachum v'chonun is a prayer, is a tefillah. And kol zman sheYisrael chotim, when Am Yisrael sins, yasu lefanai kaseder hazeh, they should whip out this formula of prayer and say it as well, vani mochel lehem, and I will forgive them. And then it says, Hashem, Hashem. Why is it twice God's name? Hashem, hu kodem sheyechata adam. This is a Kadosh Baruch Hu before God sins. Vani hu la'achar sheyechata adam. And I am the same God after God sins. V'yaseh tshuva. What does that mean? That we can cause a scenario of atonement, of forgiveness, as if the sin never, ever happened. Nothing's changed in our relationship between ourselves and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But let's qualify. Yeshayahu Hanavi said the following pasuk, and we say this in the Slichot. Im yu chata'echem kashanim, kasheleg yalbinu. Im katola katsemer yiyu. If your sins are going to be red, like tola'at, like shani. Shani is the red that we have in the Mishkan. It's a red hue. So if your sins are like red, because red is blood is bad. It's a bad color. Kashelik, I'll whiten it like snow. And if it's going to be like a worm, the color also of blood from the worm, katsemer yiyu, I'll change it to the white wool. So the question is, why does Yeshayahu Hanavi have a double expression of whiteness? Kasheleg, snow, and tsemer is also white, the case. The answer is, there are different levels of tshuva. Rambam tells us in the second chapter of the laws of tshuva, there is tshuva gemura and tshuva she'enena gemura, complete tshuva and incomplete tshuva. So what's complete tshuva? Complete tshuva is tested tshuva. A person did a sin, regretted it, and now is thrust into the identical situation with the identical ability to do the Aveira again, but does not do it because of the tshuva. Means it passed the test. But then there's a person who did an Aveira and regrets and pledges never to do it again. It's all fine. The whole process of the tshuva is fine, except the person was never encountered that scenario again in his lifetime to see if you'd pass the test again. Let's see how you're going to do next time around. So that's called tshuva she'enena gemura. So the Rambam says, it's okay, it's good, but we call sug bet, it's second fiddle. The best tshuva is a tshuva where a person was in the situation again. Let me just give an example. So in the 1930s, during the Depression years, and believe me, I'm not accusing anybody here, because it happened to people in most probably some of our families sitting right here. People came from Europe, and they were Shomrei Torah mitzvot, and they came to the American shores. It became almost impossible to make a living without working on Shabbat. This is true. I hear. We know this happened. No small number of those people, when they got to retirement age, became Shomer Shabbos again. They became Shomer Shabbos for a variety of reasons, some being that they sent their kids to day schools, and it became a little bit of a conflict at home that the kid is being taught about Shabbat, and at home they're not keeping Shabbat. Or at retirement age, the wife wanted the husband to do something in life, so she sent them to shul every day. and Shabbos is 3 hours out of the house, so that's wonderful. So the person, by default, becomes a Shomer Shabbos, not going to work anyway. So now it just became an upgrade, and so on. Is that called tshuva? The answer is yes. But it's not the same. It's the person's no longer in the scenario, the situation, what caused the lack of Shmirat Shabbat earlier in the game in his life, maybe 40 years earlier. So that's the difference between tshuva gemura and tshuva she'enena gemura. What the color of white? There are different levels of white. There's sparkling white, and there's off-white. In fabric, in textile, you can get off-white. Tzemer, wool, would be the off-white against the sheleg, which is pure white. And if you don't realize that by life's experience, there's a Mishnah in Masechet Nigaim of leprosy, and it talks about Se'et Sapachat Ubaheret, which Torah talks about actually 3 levels of leprosy, but Torah says, the Chazal say, no. Sapachat means nispach, it's an appendix. So there's an appendage to Se'et and an appendage to Baheret. So what's Baheret? Baheret means clear. Baheret is like sheleg, and Se'et is like tzemer. So in other words, the Mishnah actually tells us that there are different grades of leprosy in terms of the whiteness that the Kohen has to examine the person who's been afflicted with leprosy. So one is like snow white, that's Baheret, absolutely clear, and the other is off-white, and so on. Just yesterday, I had to change 2 LED bulbs and fixtures in the kitchen. So today they give you the choice when the electrician's putting it in. You want it this level, or this level, right? You can have white that you could blinding white, 2 lights, and then there's like yellow, they call it yellow, and then something in between. So I thought, the in between would be good because I'm a Rambam man. You take the in between. Well, guess what? It was too light, but all right. But this is what the Rambam is talking about, and that's why Yeshayahu talks about kasheleg and katzemer, because there are different levels of whiteness. But nevertheless, so the difference is, tzemer leaves a stain. A tshuva that's tshuva enena gemura. It's not total tshuva. There's something about the original avera that's still there. Once upon a time, there was a thing called blackboards in school. I know the kids don't know what I'm talking about, just like they don't know what records are. But you remember a board eraser? Remember chalk and eraser? So if you wrote something on the board and you erased it, so the word is not there any longer, but you know that somebody wrote something before because you have the smudge mark from the chalk that's still on the board. Only after you wash it down, then if the janitor wash down the boards, it becomes clean the next morning. That's what happens to one's record if it's tshuva she'enena gemura. It's only like tzemer, like wool. It leaves a mark. And that's what the Gemara tells us, that tshuva can take these donot, the deliberate averot, and make them into shgagot. Shogeg is inadvertent avera. It's an avera, but it's inadvertently done. And if it's inadvertently done, we have a case. We can get by a Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's what's called guilty with explanation. We can explain ourselves to Kadosh Baruch Hu and beg for forgiveness. We'll try not to do it again. We'll be more careful next time. Shgagot naseit ke zdonot. But there's also a category of zdonot naseit schuyot. What does that mean? That means the avera that was done, after all said and done, Kadosh Baruch Hu checks it off as a mitzvah. A mitzvah? Where's the mitzvah here? I can understand that the zadon, the mazid, the deliberate, is now looked at by a Kadosh Baruch Hu as if it's inadvertent. It's a lower. And we say this right after Kol Nidrei. V'nislach l'chol adat b'nei Yisrael ki v'lager agar b'tocham ki l'chol ha'am bishkaga. The Kadosh Baruch Hu is willing to make this deal with us and consider all of us, even if we did averot deliberately, b'mezid, Kadosh Baruch Hu will view us on Yom Kippur as a lower degree, as shogeg. But what does it mean that a Kadosh Baruch Hu will create a scenario that they become schuyot, merits? Where's the merit here? The answer is, in tshuva gemura, in the type of whitening like sheleg, like snow, What happens is, and here's a real interesting idea that the Rav once said, what do we mean when we say tshuva? We mean return to God. That's what we mean, right? V'shavta ad Hashem Elokecha. That's in the Chumash itself. You don't need, homiletics, drash for that. We're going to read it this Shabbat. V'shavta ad Hashem Elokecha. The Rav said, what you're doing is returning to the scene of the crime. He said, in natural law, you can't turn the clock back. I know we do that when we go to wintertime. We turn it back by now, but that's just a shtick. But you can't turn the clock back to the scene of the crime. You did it. But that's not true. The mitzvah of tshuva allows you spiritually to turn the clock back to the scene of the crime and correct it. The fact that you regret that you did it, the fact that you pledge you won't do it again, but you'll do it differently, you'll do it correctly, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will now replace the Aveira with a schut, with a mitzvah in that place. It's unbelievable. That is unbelievable of what can happen in the tshuva process. It's going back to the scene of the crime. On Motzei Shabbat, we say this piyut, b'motzei menucha kidamnucha k'tchila. On Motzei Shabbat. Why on Motzei Shabbat? Because on Motzei Shabbat of creation, Adam HaRishon, on the sixth day of creation, already sinned. The Gemara tells us that sixth day of creation was jam-packed with action. If I would make a movie in Hollywood, I would call it The Sixth Day. Wow, what happened on the sixth day? Adam was created. Not only was created, Chava was created. Not only that, but they were introduced to each other, and they mated, and they already had children. That was fast. And this I did already. I'll do the second one. Yeah. So before, I'll try to remember before I forget to announce this one. And it says that, and they sinned already. And they were thrown out of Gan Eden. It was a very action-packed day. And you can have a whole shiur just on trying to explain what that means, that all this happens on the sixth day. But let's just put that on the side. Now it's Motzei Shabbat. And Chazal say that Adam HaRishon already came up with Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbat, understanding that Shabbat is a day of putting it back together with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu say to Adam? Ki biyom acholcha mimenu mot tamut, the day that you violate my command. And the command was not to eat from that fruit of that tree, the Eitz Hadat. And you did eat from it. So you should have been end of the life right then and there. Ki biyom acholcha mimenu, the day. And now it's the next day. And guess what? He's still alive and kicking and breathing. Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbat. There must be something special about this. What does HaKadosh Baruch Hu do with Adam and Chava on Motzei Shabbat? Well, it's Motzei Shabbos. Got to take him out for a date, right? So there's no bowling alley. There's no ice skating, and the canyon's closed, and so on. He sits down with them, and he teaches them how to take two stones and rub them together and bring out a spark and make fire. And he teaches them how to use fire constructively. And he teaches them, this is why we will ultimately take a Ner Havdalah, to recreate that first lesson of Adam HaRishon and Chava, who were taught by Adam HaKadosh Baruch Hu that fire is a medium of destruction, but it's a medium of construction. And you can build a beautiful world. You can make light, you can make fire, you can warm the place, you can do so many different things with fire. Use it well. You're on your way now. And he gives them the tool to do this. This becomes the symbol of that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has now restored his presence with Adam and Chava. What can be a better time to turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu than on Motzei Shabbat? If you look at the source number 5, where in the underline it says, V'nutzal Adam Rishon midina shel gehenom b'schut haShabbat. The Shabbat somehow prevented Adam from going down completely. And on Motzei Shabbat, there is a big skula, a very, very, very big thing, that maybe it will be Motzei Shabbat that Eliyahu Hanavi is going to make his arrival. So much so, there's a belief that Eliyahu Hanavi is going to make his arrival. We sing right after Havdalah Eliyahu Hanavi songs, right then and there. Right then and there. Eliyahu Hanavi. So what is the Gemara talking about in another place in Masechet Eruvin? So something interesting. Eliyahu Hanavi, that Mashiach promised never to come on Shabbat. Why? Because if Mashiach comes on Shabbat, you know when Eliyahu Hanavi is going to come? On Friday. Okay? Well, how does it say? Hinei u'nechi sholech lachem et Eliyahu Hanavi lifnei bo yom Hashem hagadol v'hanora. And the worst thing in the world is Eliyahu Hanavi will show up on Friday because we're in the middle of preparing for Shabbat. Who's got time for Eliyahu Hanavi on Friday? He's going to wreck the cholent and wreck the kugel and everything. This sounds crazy, but the Gemara says this, that we have an assurance that Mashiach will never come on Shabbat, and there because so that Eliyahu Hanavi shouldn't show up on Friday, God forbid. Can you imagine? So when is the first opportunity? Motzei Shabbat. Motzei Shabbat. And we exit Shabbat like Adam and Chava exiting Shabbat. We come to you first. First means this is the first night of Slichot. And it's Motzei Shabbat, Motzei Menucha. Hat oznecha mimarom, Yoshev Tehillah. From where you are sitting, pay attention. Tune in our language. Tune in. For what? What should he tune into? Lishmoa el harina velatfilah. Who said Lishmoa el harina velatfilah? Shlomo Melech at the opening of Beit HaMikdash. Malachim Aleph Perek Chet. It's a very long tefillah. It's Lishmoa el harina velatfilah. So up the block in the great synagogue, the chazan and the choir, I think they spend a lot of time. Lishmoya, Lishmoya, Elarina, Lishmoya. It'll take them 10 minutes to finish that sentence. But Lishmoa, Elarina, Valatfilah. So if you look on the page, source number 6, the Gemara says, Tanya, there's a brighter, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, in the name of Rabbi Akiva, what are the chapters of Tillim that are said in Beit HaMikdash, sung in Beit HaMikdash by the Leviim? What we say every morning, Hashir shel Leviim hayu omrim Beit HaMikdash. So this morning was Wednesday, right? Yom Revi'i b'Shabbat. Kel nekamot Hashem, kel nekamot Afiyah. On Shabbat, it's Mizmor Shel Yom HaShabbat. On Sunday, Yom Rishon, it's Tillim Kavdalid, Lashem ha'aretz umlo'ah, al shem shekana v'hikna v'shalit be'olamo. What does it mean, Lashem ha'aretz umlo'ah? God is the boss, the owner of everything here. So much so, the Gemara in Masechet Brachot tells us that there seems to be a contradiction between this pasuk, Lashem ha'aretz umlo'ah, God owns the world, and the pasuk that we say in Hallel, which is Tehillim, Hashamayim shamayim Lashem, v'ha'aretz natan livnei adam. The earth was given to mankind. Well, let's get it right. Who's the balabos? Who's the owner of the earth? Human beings or God? The Gemara says, well, they're both right. One is before you say a bracha, and one is after you say a bracha. Before you say a bracha on the food, it belongs to God. After you say a bracha, it belongs to you. So Kadosh Baruch Hu is the motzi lechem min haaretz, right? It's in Tillim Baruch Nafshi, lotzi lechem min haaretz. So it belongs to God. But after you acknowledge that, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech olam hamotzi lechem min haaretz, Kadosh Baruch Hu says, haaretz natan livnei adam. Now it's yours. Go right ahead and eat it. And therefore the Gemara says, if you don't make a bracha, which is requesting permission from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to partake in the pleasures of His created world, you're a thief. You're a ganav. But not just a ganav. It's called mi'ilah. Mi'ilah is theft from Hegdish, from Beit HaMikdash, stealing from Beit HaMikdash. It's called ma'al. So the role of the bracha before we enjoy anything of this world is beseeching requests from God to take part in the pleasures of this world. And God says, go right ahead. Just acknowledge. Lashem ha'aretz umlo'ah. Tevel v'yoshvei ba. That's Sunday's experience. The created world. And we come to Kadosh Baruch Hu in the Slichot season. We come on the day of Lashem Haaretz Umlo'ah. We recognize everything is His. We belong to you, God. Everything, everything. And therefore, we're not here to have a suggestion of who to turn to. We know there's an exclusive address to whom to turn to. Lashem Haaretz Umlo'ah. You're the only one. And we are here on Motzei Shabbat. And what do we say in the first stanza? We say, Et yemin oz orura lasot chayil. I'll translate this. Betzedek ne'ekad v'nishchat tmuro ayel. Genano giz'o beza'akam be'od layel. Lishmoa el arina v'latfilah. We ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to tap into something about the Akedah, the fact that Avraham Avinu was willing to do the most irrational act, and that was to take his son and slaughter him on the altar. It went against the grain of everything that Avraham Avinu understood, everything he preached, everything he encouraged. Don't do this. This is pagan. This is murder. You're not allowed. God's not interested in this. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes and tells him, "Kachna et bincha et yichidcha asher ahavta et Yitzchak, va'aleu le'olah al achad ha'arim asher omar alecha." And what does Avraham Avinu say? Hineni, I'm ready to do it. I'm ready to do it. Which means he's sacrificing his own logic, his own common sense. Everything about him he's sacrificing, not just his own son. Everything he's willing to put on the line. And of course, the Kadosh Baruch Hu did this as a test to see how far Avraham Avinu's faith in God would go. And it went to the maximum. I believe, and I've said this in various connections for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, when the Chazan begins Musaf on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, Hineni he'ani mimas, Hineni he'ani mimas. That Hineni is the collective Hineni that he's saying on behalf of all of the congregation, of everybody. We must be ready to say Hineni. If you're not ready to say Hineni, you're not in. Kadosh Baruch Hu is not there for us on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. And we tap into the Akedah right away in the first Slichot. And we will do it again in various piyutim, poems of Slichot, until and including Yom Kippur. We will read about the Akedah on the second day Rosh Hashanah. We will, on both days Rosh Hashanah, in the second special bracha of Zichronot, talk about the Akedah. That will be the focus of the bracha Zocher Habrit. So much so that there's actually a discussion of how to organize the Musaf of Rosh Hashanah, because there's this issue of 9 brachot and 10 things on the agenda. And without getting into the details, we do it like Rabbi Akiva. We combined the Malchiot with the Kedushat Hayom, the sanctity of the day. We have a double-edged ending, Baruch Atah Hashem, Melech HaKol HaAretz, Mekadesh Yisrael V'Yom HaZikaron. But there was an opinion that the Kedushat Hayom, the sanctity of the day, is to be grafted on the Zichronot bracha, to teach us that part of the sanctity of the day of Rosh Hashanah is the Akedah. What does that mean, the Akedah? So we end the bracha of Zichronot by saying, V'akedat Yitzchak Hayom Lezar'o Barachamim Tiskor. We mention that God should remember on this day, on this calendar date, the 1st of Tishrei, the Akedah. We're taking some overdraft, as if to say, from the merits of Avraham Avinu. Says Rav Soloveitchik, that's not the word Hayom means. Hayom means today. It means the next Thursday, which will be the 1st of Tishrei of Tafshin Pei Hey. Hayom, we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to take note of all of our moments of self-sacrifice, and there are many, many, and some, as we talk, are being asked to go up to the Akedah, and not everybody comes down. Not everybody comes down from the Akedah, and we know that. We know that. And there are all different types of modes of Mesirat Nefesh. Sometimes it takes our time and effort, sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's this, sometimes it's that. And whatever it is, we're saying Hineni, and we're asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu, take note of all of our self-sacrifice that we put into loving you, following you, and so on. Yes, we've done Averot, we know all that. And he doesn't forget a darn thing. Zocher kol hanishkachot. Everything is there. You cannot deny it at all. But with all that, Kadosh Baruch Hu should use as the great merit where we stand. And we stand with tremendous amount of Mesirat Nefesh. And from the days of Rav Avraham Avinu until today, it will stand as a schut. V'akedat Yitzchak bezaro hayom berachamim tiskor. And Kadosh Baruch Hu should listen to all of our tefillot. And we should daven for our private needs and for our national needs, and there are many. And for the health of everybody, and for the prosperity of everybody, and for the shalom of everybody, in the house, in the country, in the world. We should have the schut of Hashem, Ya Hashem lemelech hakol haaretz, bayomu Hashem echad u'shmo echad, and it should be Hashem oz namo yiten, Hashem yivarech et amo v'shalom. In Mirz Hashem, we will meet again in 2 weeks' time in Aseret Mitzvah on Wednesday morning. Should be a K'tiv Aktimat Adler.